Okay, hello everybody. This is Tony Miracker, and I'm the section chairperson here in Toronto. And thank you for joining us here. We have something new this time around. We have both a in-person viewing and we also have a virtual viewing. So I just want to show you the in-person. So we'll do this, and hopefully this is working. So you can see everybody waving. And all these recipients received a pizza box for lunch or dinner. So for those who couldn't make it or missing out on a pizza. And I'm going to try and zoom in, but I don't know that I can do that. Oh, there I can. And there's Peter in the background there, is running the AV for us tonight. So let me get rid of this before you guys all get sick. With Kevin Ryerson, representative, making sure that Peter is pressing all the right buttons and that. So again, this is something new for us because we are doing this both virtually and also in-house. Sponsor tonight is Applied Electronics, so we thank them for that. So a round of applause for them. I was always told by TV people that if you clap twice as fast and twice as hard, you sound like twice as many people. I'm not sure, Lane, maybe you can attest to that. So I'm going to move the chair over, or sorry, the duties here for moderator over to Stosh, and he's going to run the boat, and I will.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tony. And we're just going to jump ahead here. So tonight's topic is the NAB Wrap Up. It's always a great evening on our schedule. I'll be moderating tonight, and we, as Tony said, we got Peter on the controls. Some of you at home, some here. We're going to go through the 4 presentations, and then we'll do a question and answer panel. So certainly feel free to submit your questions on the Zoom meeting, and then the local people can certainly ask live in person. Our presenters today, we'll go through them one at a time, but first up will be Lane Steinauer from Bell Media, David August from Dome, Paul Roser from Applied Electronics, and Graham Beer from the Toronto Metropolitan University. For those of you that aren't familiar, TMU is the new name for Ryerson, our host here tonight. So before we jump into the first presenter, certainly I was at NAB this year, certainly as a vendor again, as per normal. Things in Vegas certainly did change up a little bit. There were some new buildings up as there normally are. You know, it was 3 years since the last time we did NAB. 2019 was the last time we were there. Some stuff changed up. I'm sure everyone will touch on it, but there was nothing down in the South Hall, and there's a new West Hall that was built. So there's a bunch of stuff over there. I didn't make it into the West Hall myself, but I hear this new Tesla loop thing got you over there all right. So that was cool. Certainly most of the vendors downsized their space. Certainly we did. The halls were, the walkways were a little bit wider. The volume was down a little bit, but I got to tell you, from our perspective, the quality of people was fantastic. Everyone we talked to, everyone that came in had something real they were working on. You know, the quote unquote tire kickers just weren't there this year. So we got to spend a lot of great time with people working on some really cool projects, and really got some quality time with them, some time to connect. You know, a number of people came in saying it was very much like IBC, where you got a little more time to get with the quality people you wanted to see while you were there. So just as a little opener, I just wanted to say those few words, and then now we will pass it along to Lane. Lane has 30 plus years in the media broadcast industry, demonstrated history of developing new processes and creating new directions. He loves to push technologies and loves to be an early adopter. With that, I'd like to welcome Lane Steinauer from Bell Media. So we just need to jump to your presentation.
All right, I just stole this off the NAB site. NAB this year was quite unique. It was quite different than in the past. The 2 years or 3 years have gone, but it was much smaller footprint. But as I said, people were far more communicative, and you could actually talk. You didn't have to scream, so it was quite nice. Attendance this year was down quite a bit, 52,000 from the previous one was 91,000. International attendance was 11,542, and countries represent 155. So even though it's smaller, there's still a nice selection from the world going around it. Overall, start off, my impressions of the NAB this year is cloud is here. People have thought it or disbelieved it or unbelieved it, whatever way you want to go, for a long time, but it was everywhere. Every facet of the process, the cloud is there. Now, cloud is probably the second most misunderstood word next to AI. So cloud is just common facilities, whether it's somebody else's or yours, you have to do it. It's a way of dealing with getting rid of all the computers we have stuck everywhere. The other big thing I noticed this year is AR, VR, XR, whatever flavor you want to throw on it. They're now daily tools, and they went from unique, everybody saw the weather tree go through your set and go on it, but now you see them in everyday production, and that's everyday production from whether you want to do something super fancy with a 180 LED screen or just a green screen or wall, but by tying all the technology of the cameras and the controls together, you can shoot much better, much faster, and create a much better content. And in two of the presentations I went to, they had talent up, and the talent sort of come up and said, their processes and when they do their shows are so much better because they're not looking aimlessly into a green dot or a yellow dot. They're actually seeing the person they're interacting with. And that's just taking the content level up even higher. The other thing that's very unique is remote productions. Because it's one little thing called COVID, we all had to run from home. We started remote productions, and everybody, I think, perfected them in many different ways. We started coming back, and we've discovered that I think our remote productions are here to stay. And our remote productions are actually giving us more tools versus the way we do things. The thing that kind of shocked me was green sustainability was mentioned in many, many features of productions. There's actually a couple of booths that are telling you how to do your productions better, how to cut your carbon footprint, how to collect taxes or government taxes back. And it's kind of nice to see that that is growing into the entertainment business as well. And the other misunderstood word I said before is AI. AI is everywhere, every part of the chain, everywhere we want to go. I think everybody put it in they're very different degrees, and I think it is part of our future. And again, just some fun things here. The Tesla tunnel was kind of good. Everybody loves it. When you walked into NAB, the front doors, the central, there's the motorcycle you can jump onto and you can go for a ride, and that was powered by the Unreal engines. Just kind of neat. Busiest booth, my personal award was the AWS booth. It was 20 people deep every time I went over there. It's followed up by Blackmagic was where everybody was. The show this year was a little bit different. They divide them into 4 categories, and I thought it was kind of great because we kind of do it in our mind, but these categories are actually how many companies are redeveloping their businesses. So they created a whole create division and sort of separated what's all part of creation and what's involved onto it. The Create has exploded with so many tools and advancement. The biggest thing about Create is the decoupling and decentralization. No longer is everything going to be in one spot. No longer you have to be in multi-spot. You can be in multiple little spots. That's because of advancements in IP, remote productions, and XR, VR. And I don't think I went to a booth that Unreal wasn't used at in terms of production. I don't know, I wish they had stocks. Apparently they don't have any stocks. I checked them out, but they seem to be the engine running a lot of the production. And the big one was Chiron, Viz, EVS, and others are proudly displaying IP workflows and switchers, and the EVS switchers working quite nice. They had points all over America on it. It was great. Connect. Connect was another section they put down through. I think in the old days we would call Connect transmitters. And again, but that's now changed. Transmission is part of it because, there's a big push for ATSC 3.0 and for HD radio and those things, but it goes above and beyond. We now have so many ways of connecting. I love the word to our customers. There's 100 over the tops. There's how many, digital delivery services are there? There's, even to get down to the consumer ones, the TikToks and YouTubes. Those are all part of Connect, and we all got to find our way into them. And I think it is a very exciting time. I don't think TV's dead. It is changing, and we have far more opportunities, but we need to explore them. Again, starting with the traditional over-the-air transmissions, there's a lot of push in the States. Again, they really like the ATSC 3.0 and HD radio. I'm not so sure in Canada. I know from our company, we're not so looking forward to doing those directions. I think there are big value in them, but I think they're limited value because they're one-way push only. And I think there's so much more on the consumer OTT side that can give us so many more options. And the metaverse, I never understood it till this year. I hear the word and says go on it. It's just a whole, basically to me, it's just a way of connecting to the customer better with experience. We have so much more metadata that we can share, so I can directly focus on you directly versus a wide variety. Capitalize was another section I had, and I hadn't thought of it in a while, and it's probably one of the areas that I'm probably most weakest at, and something we need to take a look at in all of our businesses is, as we go down here, we all have our passion, what we like, but how do we make money at it? So they actually set up some things on there, how you can do it in some sessions. You know, again, the lines kind of blur between the different sections. So rule 1, we have to make money. New rule, how do we make money? New world. There's lots of revenue chains possibilities out there. I am really just scratching the surface trying to see that. I mean, looks like it's a wide open avenue, so hopefully we can capitalize on that. Intelligent content was another section they had, and this is where data and AI in every part is important, because not only can AI, if we leverage it right, help us with our pre-production, with our production, all the way down to distribution to the end customer. So it's a huge exploding area. So we have a whole bunch of new worlds we have to play on. And this is a slide. Most of the slides are off the NAB site. Anybody wants to see them and take a look at them. This is kind of just a nice little slide where they put down, no matter where you are, content is king. We need to get content and be able to create revenue on it. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Next up, we have Mr. David August, Director of Technical Operations at Dome Productions. David has been working in the media and entertainment industry for 22 years. He recently joined Dome Productions after spending 11 years with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. This was David's 9th NAB, and he was focused on cloud video transport and innovation in production. David doesn't have a presentation for us today, but he's got lots of content in that head of his and looks forward to sharing his experiences with you now. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Obviously, you know, one of the things that I looked at about talking about tonight is really focusing on how, as a service provider, Dome as a service provider, how do we, you know, continue to foster growing relationships with our customers and provide new and innovative solutions. And so as I went to NAB and I looked at, you know, how do we change our mindset to say, you know, am I really just engineering, or am I really now trying to solution and build architectures for my customers, and really how to support them in their challenges? Because what we see is our customers are coming to us with new and innovative challenges. So one's obviously, all of us, we've experienced remote production. COVID, we didn't have a choice and we all had to pivot. But we're seeing more challenges come out of that now with this adoption of remote production. Now we're looking at extreme remote, so off the grid, off the map productions. How do we bring live production from a remote destination to our customers? How do we solution that? We're more focused on the full lifespan of content now. So right from that image acquisition to this, you know, archiving. How do we, again, participate in being good partners with our production companies, good partners with the plant, and how do we facilitate that? And so when we approached NAB this year, we didn't look at, cameras or lenses or traditional production equipment, but yet that is our core business in the OB industry, traditional production. But where we see is our growth opportunity and where we need to evolve and mature, and why we go to this type of, you know, show is really to explore what is new, what is going to push the boundary, and how do we participate in our way in that new and evolving content creation, technology, the new world that we are all trying to solve. That, you know, many of our production partners come to us and ask us, how do I solve my problems? So we spend a lot of time, you know, we spent some time with Sony and understanding why did they buy Nevion? Why is a traditional production company now buying a transport solution and content control organization? So trying to see how the industry is evolving. So again, from traditional sort of maybe, you know, maybe not bricks and mortars, but circuit chips to now solutioning. We see that a lot with our, you know, the adoption of IP, and that's how we were talking with our partners at EVS and Evertz and, you know, VizRT. Again, they're not necessarily building bare metal boxes anymore, and we're now working on how to build solutions. As we talked about the cloud, I mean, again, you know, the solution is no longer the hardware. It's about the flow of technology, the flow of information, the flow of content, and so really, again, if we're not hardware experts anymore, then now we need to evolve and be solution experts. So to really understand and how we support our customers in creating great solutions. A part of our business, obviously, as many of you may know, is we're in the transport business and in, you know, providing connectivity. And certainly through, you know, the pandemic, we've seen an uptick in that, but also an evolution where once upon a time we used to, you know, traditionally transport baseband. Now we're moving to more either encoded, lightly encoded signals, you know, SRT contributions, RISC contributions, NDI. So again, and they don't work the same as SDI in the workflow. So again, trying to continue to educate ourselves on how to manage them, latency, engineering, quality control, even everything from, you know, some of the winners this year at NAB are, you know, multi-viewers, IP-based multi-viewers. Like, just how do I monitor all of these signals that are now just floating around in the, you know, in space? Where, you know, traditionally for us, our core business, we were focused very much on the truck. We focused about our world inside the, you know, the OB van. And now we're thinking much more beyond that. And, you know, our new customers are coming to us again, not just looking to you know, to rent local facilities, but now local facilities, transport facilities, end solutions, packaging, potentially distribution. And they're not distributing just to traditional linear television. They want to distribute to mobile. They want to distribute to web. And some of our customers are asking us how to support that. So, you know, really, I think for us, why did we go to NAB is really to start to learn about and continue to grow our education in that file-based workflow, the digital-based workflow in the sense of encoded signals, and how do we continue to grow our business? Again, I think, as you know, we heard from the previous presenter, that world is here. And it's, you know, I think that we've had a bit of a jump start because of the pandemic. We all were set on the same footing and pushed forwards. And I think the adoption has been really well. So for me, what was really exciting is, again, to see that the various manufacturers and the partners that we work with have started to embrace that. You know, our integrator partners have started to, again, foster the same concept as we are and how to support us and help us to foster new and innovative creations or creative solutions. And I think it's an exciting time. There was definitely, you know, some practical things that obviously with the show being a little smaller and maybe not people not being there to present as much. Again, you know, a lot of times, remember, you know, people wanted to show you the latest product, touch it, show it. I felt that this was more around, again, a lot more focus on solutions. What are your challenges? How do we help you? Less about, let me show you hardware. So again, I think that's, again, more and more indicative that our industry is moving towards more of that solution, and we're not bound by the traditional hardware anymore, but really bound by our creativity. So thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Paul Roser. Paul is a graduate of Ryerson's RTA program and spent his early career in post-production as an editor and in operations management at Motion Picture Video Corp, one of Toronto's first post houses. He's not really that old. Post started a little bit late in Toronto, we're going to say. The mastering studios, an early player in compressed video for multimedia, and at Stonehenge Post, where he also authored the first DVDs in Canada when each project was a command line science project. For nearly 20 years, he has been with Applied Electronics, starting as an account manager and now acting as the manager of sales operations. His client base includes Canada's nuclear industry, many of Ontario's educational institutions, and around half of Canada's legislatures, where Applied has a specialty in their unique broadcast needs. Paul, please come on up and join us.
So, hello everyone. So I've sort of got two parts here. I've got a lot of pictures just because for those who couldn't get to NAB, give you a bit of a visual look at what was there, and then some other comments outside of that. So you've already heard NAB was smaller this year. I think everybody agrees with that. And this is kind of representative. This was in the South Hall, or sorry, in the Central Hall, 45 minutes into the first day. 10:45, not exactly elbow to elbow. A couple aisles over was a little better. That was starting to get busier. And then, well, that's not a great shot there, but, and then you've heard of the new West Hall. This is it with its, well, hardly anybody in the lobby, this big display. And then within the West Hall, again, not a lot of traffic. Well, yeah, and there's Tall Paul. And I think many people probably know, or maybe know, some of the NAB tricks to make it look like it's busier than it is. Well, that was in full force this year, because that is actually the Central Hall and a whole end of it that was curtained off, so you weren't supposed to notice just how empty it was. NAB does this all the time, but that was that was pretty prevalent this year. Again, the whole notion that NAB was about half the size that I think we're used to. Lane mentioned this one. So this was a virtual reality sort of ride. So from this side, you really only see the participant there. The participant in the camera or in the monitors ahead of them could actually see the virtual reality experience with what's behind them. But that was one of the crowd draws in the connecting point between the North and Central halls. And just this was one of the things that interested me in particular, more and more, you know, that we're getting away from green screen and the idea of LED display. And so this was planar, and they were actually showing an LED wall behind, actually a tapered one, and then it was an LED floor as well. And so that just kind of gave an idea of the way it went together. And then the two ladies, as it looked on a, you know, on a screen, or rather on an image from the camera, and then just a little peek at, you know, all the connecting stuff behind. And Lane mentioned the new addition, getting around NAB, especially with the new West Hall, which is a bit of a trek. It's just adjacent or across the road from the North Hall, and so getting around a bit of a challenge. One of the stations, and a little bit of the ride experience.
If you guys were talking to me, I was just doing radio traffic.
No, we're good.
Welcome to the loop. Sorry, we're going through closing.
Are we going back in time right now, or?
This is a top secret time machine facility.
That's why the colors, yeah.
Hi, Mark.
We're actually going forward. If it's 2025 when we get to the other side, we know it's worked.
So this show will be over, right? This
Yeah,
will be
yeah.
over.
Thank
Yay!
God.
This NAB and the next 3 or 4 NABs will have been put into the books.
Yep.
So
It
that's
hasn't
literally
worked
the
yet,
whole ride
so-
between the Central and West Hall. You know, pretty quick ones, but they're just Teslas. They're not even
Yeah, this
automated, not
2022.
full self-drive
You know what?
Teslas. They still have
I
drivers
was
at the
looking forward to
moment.
the show. It's been
Apparently that will change. And just before I get into other notes, one other thing that I found interesting, and a lot of people, I think it was even a SMPTE tour of it, is the Msg Sphere, which is not monosodium glutamate, but Madison Square Garden, this is a joint venture between them and the Venetian. And so this is a new auditorium sort of along the way. You can see it from the convention center, but this is a cool new venue. The inner concrete core is the actual theater itself, and then the exoskeletons being built on the outside, which will have displays. There, another view, and there's sort of a concept thing of how it all works with, there's the whole dome up above and the ceiling. Almost like the old Maple Leaf Gardens seating, but some of the statistics on that, the Sphere is costing them $1.8 billion to build. It's a music and entertainment arena, seating for 17,500 people, the world's largest LED screen at 19,000 by 13,500 pixels, apparently the size of 3 football fields. In the space, there's 157,000 unidirectional speakers, kind of mind-boggling. And that exterior piece will be an LED, not an LED display, but there'll be LEDs all through it to do sort of, I guess, effects outside. The whole thing is 366 feet tall, and it's being built for attractions, concert residencies, corporate events, award shows. But just in its own right, it's kind of a cool technological thing, really. Just that whole immersive space right there. So a little bit off topic, but I found it interesting. I thought others here might too. So in terms of NAB, as Lane mentioned, it was about 52,500 people this year, and the last one we had before that was 91,500. Next year is actually supposedly the centennial of NAB. And it will also use the center, north, and west halls, no south hall. So for this year, a lot of the booths didn't actually have gear. Others have touched on that. As we move more to software, I mean, some of the vendors had their typical booths because they don't really have gear. They have a display and a keyboard, and they're showing you software solutions. But a lot of the traditional vendors like Ross, I'm blanking on others now. Ross comes to mind, Grass Valley, didn't really have heavy iron there. Partly it was just the nature of this NAB. I imagine that'll all be back next year. But it was very different in that sense of not having as much equipment. The booths were largely smaller, even Sony's. The one that was more or less its normal size, although in a different position, was Blackmagic. They were more or less the size we're used to seeing. The floor space itself was about half the normal size, in spite of them using 3 halls. I guess the double level of the south hall and it not being part of the equation made a big difference. And as Stosh and others said, we had a lot of meetings with a variety of manufacturers. And yeah, a common thread was exactly what Stosh had said, that it was mostly decision makers and that level of person, and not really much in the way of tire kickers. It was I guess it was almost a dream NAB from the manufacturer's point of view this year. Another thing that we heard from some of the manufacturers in talking to them, we're all aware of how the supply chain has been a bit of a disaster the last couple of years, but there's moving things around issues and that kind of thing. But one of the things that a few manufacturers had mentioned was what's really messing them up right now is the availability of GPUs. So much of the stuff really relies on that now as software based. And one example we were given, they use the GPU component they have used in the past in a number of their products. I'll not say who it was costing them in the past $60 for each chip. That same chip is going for $1,000 now. So that starts to explain a bit more of the supply chain issues, I think, that we're seeing, because the market's not going to bear that kind of a price increase. A lot of the manufacturers are trying to, re-engineer around other chips that they can get more readily. So that's a part of, what's going on, I guess, with the industry. In terms of what we saw there, incremental improvements. I wouldn't say there was any, major awesome. You talk to people outside and say, "Did you see?" There wasn't really any of that this year. Some of the common threads we saw, there was a lot of NDI, a lot of manufacturers that have started to embrace it and incorporate it. NDI 5, the latest flavor. NDI, sort of from an engineering purist point of view, I guess, NDI a number of years back, everybody kind of poo-pooed, I think, just because it was compressed and we didn't want to be in that world. But it's certainly, with the force now. And one of the little asides to that, just for anybody who's not aware, Andrew Cross, the father of NDI, who when New Tech was absorbed by VizRT, stayed with them for quite a while. He actually left and he's the CEO of Grass Valley now. So that's a bit of a segue for him. Also already mentioned, but move to the cloud. Yes, there was a lot of that there. Some examples I saw, even something as small as anybody who's done production with those Atomos little, they're little displays, but they also do recording and all of that you sort of bolt onto a camera rig. They actually now have Atomos Cloud Studio and a capture to the cloud option for some of their devices, which, embracing cloud in a different way. Similarly, Blackmagic and Resolve is now available as a cloud thing for collaboration. One I wouldn't have expected, but Sony, in having something, a departure for them, they now have a drone, the AirSpeak S1. And it's up there in price. It's not like one of the little DJI ones, but it's solid and it's built to carry an Alpha series camera. And so even Sony has gotten into that corner of the market. Didn't hear anything about. I know I've heard. They also say Apple's building a car, but who knows? Some other things that people have already touched on, but I guess just if I had to pick a single word for this NAB, especially versus past ones, it was relaxed. It was what we all wish NAB was, and normally isn't. But it was, I'm not sure anybody could say. I think pleasure and NAB is a bit of an oxymoron, but it was probably as close as you could get. It was certainly a much tamer and more enjoyable NAB than what I think we come to expect. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know if tamer is the right word. Perhaps it's manageable, or yeah, something that we could tolerate maybe without hurting ourselves. All right. And as we plug back in, our final of 4 presenters tonight is Mr. Graham Beer. Graham is a student graduating from the RTA Media Production Program and will begin his Master's of Arts in Media Production this fall at TMU. He is the founder and executive producer of Coburg Media and an editorial assistant at CBC News. So without further ado, Graham, come on up. And he brought his fans, which is great.
Thank you, Sasha. Appreciate it. Now, of course, NAB was my first. So I got the Ross pin. Jacob and I got our 1 year, and we'll build as we go. I know there's some veterans in the room, so that was quite exciting. However, we did pick up quite a bit of merch. So I packed my suitcase, and does anyone else have a fancy SMPTE hat? I'm sure you do, but I got my first one, so that was exciting. So I think we had, I think Jacob and Rick can talk about this, but I think obviously this was most of our first times. There was a couple students who had been there before, so they got to see the comparison that you've been talking about tonight. But this was my first experience, so I didn't have anything to compare to previous years, which I think is a good thing, because as we're all talking about it being scaled back, maybe that was a good thing, because we had maybe an opportunity to chat with some people that maybe we wouldn't be able to otherwise, which was really great. So we met David Grindle, SMPTE Executive Director, which was really exciting. And then Hans Hoffman, the SMPTE President, was there. And then also Roberta Gorman was also there, and she's in the right picture, obviously talking up the student membership and everything like that. So this was just outside on our way into, I think this was after our Central Hall visit. So I'll start there. Rick obviously gave us a really nice tour to some of his friends. I guess, is that the right word, Rick? Yes, your friends who were very willing to chat with all of us. So we stopped at ARI first, and I thought this was really interesting, because when I think of ARI, I think about the cinematic cameras, and I think about the traditional film cameras that we normally expect on big screens. However, their setup was focused on live multi-camera production, which is my focus. This is what I love. So I really found it was interesting. We watch theatrical productions for concerts and for other theater productions, and we see that very cinematic look. But what they had there is they had just a multi-camera setup. They had a robo-track, if you can kind of see there on the other side of the monitor there. But they had live performances, and they had live speakers, which I thought was really neat. And then so you could kind of see the launch of their new camera. It was the Amira Live Cinematic Super 35. So they had that on display, and then you could see the integration with fiber and everything like that. So I thought that was really interesting. And then in the right picture there, we were looking at some of the parts that they were assembling with some of their camera gear. Then the next stop, which was really neat, we met Aleister Chapman. A lot probably recognize him from Sony as a cinematographer, but also as an instructor. So I think Rick was really impressed that he gave us, it was like a 20-minute lesson on cinematography, kind of a 101 kind of little lesson about the technology. But I really loved one of the things he said was that these are just the tools to support our visions, but it's our visions that really bring the stories to life, and our ideas as well. So I thought that was really interesting and really exciting to hear from Aleister. And Sony had, of course, as we were talking about tonight, some of their gear. They've launched, the drone we were talking about, and also some of the new 4K broadcast cameras. And as our TA students, we love the gear, so I think we enjoy that as well. And also another point is the cloud ecosystem. So I just did my practicum over the fall, and Jacob, I don't know how many cards we had over the course of the day or two, but just seeing how the workflow can really change in the future, and then even in the next few years, of how we don't have to spend hours, unloading cards and stuff like that, which is really exciting. And I think my practicum peers were jealous that I got to see some of the new technology. And that was the CI Media Cloud Services, is what they're calling. And they also announced the Venice 2 camera, and they had it on display as well, which was pretty neat. It was very dark in the Sony booth. Then we made our way over to Ross Video, and I know Rick loves to make us well known to the Ross representatives. So we saw Scott, Don, and Jeff, and also Jake was there as well, who we had a nice dinner with. Jacob and I enjoyed chatting with Jake. And so as we talked about, yes, there were some major companies that didn't have technology on the floor. However, I did make it an opportunity to go to the HyperX Esports arena. which Ross has outfitted with all of their gear. And it was really interesting because, you know, I've seen lots of their products. We have lots of Ross switchers and products here at Ryerson, but I think it was exciting to see all of their products come together in an ecosystem. But we're trying to build the esports up, and as it is a booming industry, as we know, in Canada, it's really interesting to see it on like a full-fledged scale and operation. And as soon as you walk in the door at the HyperX, you see Ross products in motion, from their the LED wall. They have a hype tunnel, so when you walk in, there's a bit of a tunnel, so that's pretty neat. But just some stats on it, because I thought I would come with some information, so you know. So that's 30,000 square feet, multi-level, so there's like 2 levels, and there's a production studio, multiple control rooms and studios outside of this larger event space. That's retractable seating. But it was really interesting because all of the player stations, they've got cameras there, so they can capture the gameplay, the emotion and the excitement of the players, but also to ingest all of those computers and all that information. That was really interesting to see. And it really felt like, you know, I see what esports production is like, you know, online, but it was really interesting to see they had a control room, and then they had like an announcer's booth. So it actually looked like we were overlooking from the announcer's booth. It kind of looked like we were at a Raptors game or an event like that, because that's kind of how they set it up as a traditional, like a sporting event, but for esports. So I thought that was really neat. And with to see all of the Ross products together, I thought that was really really interesting. Then we made our way over to the West Hall. Of course, we made usage of the tunnels. We thought that was really cool. And we stopped at Dejero, and Rick, I know you always enjoy stopping and chatting with them. And they their kind of product this year that they were talking about was the NGO 265 mobile transmitter. And that's increased productivity, half a second latency, and something that they really kind of emphasize for that product is the gateway mode for the broadband connectivity. And of course, we've seen a lot of the evolution of the Dejero products, but it's really interesting because here at Ryerson, or the Toronto Metropolitan University, we have quite a few, you know, Dejero and IP streaming products. So it's really interesting to see kind of the future and how that is now evolving. One of my favorite products has always been Blackmagic Design. I think as a student, it's exciting because it's affordable in terms of a student budget. We're able to afford the cameras, the switchers, and the functionality that has really grown over the years is really exciting. And so I just happened to be there, and Grant Petty, the Blackmagic Design CEO, was talking to his customers. And I thought that was really neat to, you know, to see the CEO of a large company really invested and excited to hear from their customers and young people like me. So yeah, that was really, really great to speak with him. And he was quite interested in hearing the stories of the success stories, the challenges, and then how we can evolve, you know, with their products. And so I personally own Blackmagic Design cameras and switchers. And it's really interesting to see that, you know, we talk about workflow, and we talk about cloud, and we talk about IP. So I think they're really embracing all of those products at an affordable price, which is exciting. And the DaVinci Resolve, the cloud store, that was kind of their big thing that came out this year. And yeah, so I think that was really neat that you can now operate DaVinci Resolve and work collaboratively with other folks at the same time. And the last slide I wanted to show here, we went to Zero Density, of course, with their Unreal Engine demo. So right there, they were demoing, I think, sports and then the Weather Channel. So that was really interesting to see, and then go over to another booth like Plenar and see their LED walls. Now, that was really interesting too, because that camera had a sensor. So that was a curved wall. So when they moved that camera, that kind of that block picture there, they've got kind of two pictures. So they've got the wide and then they've got the close-up picture, but that moves with the camera. So to really see how like high tech and how accurate that is with the picture pitch and the image quality, I thought that was really interesting. So to compare it, from the Unreal Engine to virtual and green screen to LED, you can kind of still see that we're, as an industry, we're still using both, and they have their pros and cons as well. My last thing that I did at NAB was I participated in the live news podcasts and event streaming workflows tour with Philip Nelson. And Philip Nelson is a television producer. He's also a developer of TV systems and studios. So he builds studios and systems for facilities all over North America. So he really had a lot of live event background, and which was really interesting. But he kind of took us around to stops where I wouldn't necessarily go to smaller companies, smaller products that are up and coming. From anything from NDI, or we even went to an LED light company that was really kind of trying new things. So lots to kind of explore with that. And, we went from closed captioning to NDI workflows to the traditional Blackmagic, but then to, discovering lights and other little cool gadgets. So, and I think what I would want to take away from NAB, since this is my first one, is that, IP is not just a buzzword, it's happening. The growth of media personalization, it's a big deal. And as we were talking about, how do we capitalize on it? And I think my 3 words, you had 1 word, but I'm gonna have 3. And my 3 words is flexibility, modularity, and scalability. I heard those words a lot. So that is my presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
And just to add to what Graham was talking about, Paul Roser and Paul Steckley and Applied have always been very big supporters of this event. And unfortunately, they don't have a booth. And we rarely get them in those lovely yellow shirts. So I'd like to thank Paul Roser and Paul Steckley in his absence. Thank you very much for supporting the students too.
Over the years, you've become accustomed to seeing those vibrant colored shirts around the floor, and after a couple of years of not being there, it was a little bit comforting knowing that they were from home, right? We always had somebody from home there that we could that we recognize, although we might not know their faces. We sure know where they came from. So with that, if we can get our presenters back up to the stage. Now we're going to get a little more interactive. We're certainly going to welcome questions from everyone at home or wherever you might be watching this virtually, as well as anyone here. So if we can get the 4 of you back up here. There's 3 hand mics there. We'll pass those around. Maybe as you're making your way up, I'll just open it with a little thought. For those of you that weren't there, this year it started on Sunday. So the show started Sunday through Wednesday as opposed to Monday through Thursday. Certainly from our side, we noticed that the numbers were down a little bit. It was a little bit quieter on the first day. But what that did was it made those first 3 days much better. The 3rd day was still a pretty strong day, more like a regular Tuesday. I just wanted to, did you guys notice any impact of a start on Sunday? Was that beneficial to you guys? Was that something that you liked? Please grab a mic each and certainly share your thoughts.
I thought the Sunday start was great because you sort of got a slow start into it, so it was great.
Right, cool. Paul, any notice on that, or?
Well, mixed feelings about it, but yeah, the last NAB, they started that in 19, and I looked ahead, they're doing it in next NAB as well. At one point, they talked about slipping it even to Saturday, but at least so far, I don't think they're doing that. And apparently they did it because I guess especially California being next door and the Hollywood community there, apparently they thought they could get the numbers up because there would be people who would come sort of on a weekend day, like just scoot over from LA. And it was really all about trying to increase the numbers when they started this Sunday. this Sunday start.
I was thoroughly confused all week because I didn't know what day it was. Because every time I turned around, I was like, "What day is it?" Because again, my brain had been conditioned to sort of always start on that Monday. I actually thought that they moved it to make room for the NFL draft. I don't know. No one. I was surprised. All the wonderful pictures you gentlemen had, and no one mentioned the rather exhaustive setup. Both you could see from the tram. There was a huge setup, and then there was obviously the large setup inside the Palazzo Pond. They had floating stages. But I thought that's why they moved it. I thought they were just like, yeah, we can't compete with the NFL draft. No one can compete with the NFL.
All right, any questions from the room here? Peter, you getting anything in from afar? No, nothing yet. So it's been, oh, here we got.
Technology is moving for solution, right? People like solutions that are part of business concerns, following the business model. What you have seen in terms of providers for control, in terms of network controlling, flows, etc., that can handle these fires of performance that you mentioned, wireless, TV,
Maybe David, start with the question so those are at home can.
I think if I summarize the question, I think the question was around, did we see any orchestration tools that control, monitor flows, such as NDI, RIST, SRT? Is that more or less? So yes, I'm going to rely on some of my cheat sheet here. But yes, the short answer is, even companies. So I'll start as I remember here. Companies like Net Insight. So again, not only are they, where they were traditionally an encoder solution primarily in point-to-point encoding and decoding, they are now moving more and more in towards, again, orchestration, point to multi-point. So being able to, again, how do you ingest, monitor, control, inspect signals as they travel from point to point. As I mentioned in my presentation, Nevion, from now part of the Sony family. One sec here as I bring up my notes. I spoke about Net Insight. We met with Tag, who was doing the IP multi-viewing. We met with Media Links. We're also doing HeyVision, has some wonderful, again, I would say that, those that are who have been or are providing the encoding and decoding solutions are also now broadening their software solutions to provide orchestration as well. Yeah, maybe any others? MediaKind, we spoke with MediaKind. So again, lots of great opportunities, because again, that orchestration is really important, especially when we start to talk about point to multi-point production.
Anybody else comment?
Another question here.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, we saw big network shows going to the hosts' homes. So I'm curious to know kind of what the remote contribution equipment and systems that they use for all of those remote contributors. Did that ever come up in any of your discussions?
Again, I'll share with what we've used or participated in. So we have, again, we've been
touch on the question just so those that.
Oh yeah, sorry. The question is what was being used for remote contribution for in-home broadcast. So when we went from the pandemic, what did we use from people's homes? And some of that was as simple as I think OBS has become really popular, and vMix. Again, those crazy two guys from Australia, I think they probably quadrupled their sales all in 1 year with their solution. Wirecast, again, would be another great solution. Even things, very interesting as we look at things like even Skype. had an NDI plugin so that you could stream NDI across your local network from a Skype computer. New Tech had the talk show, which was again their solution. There were software solution only, G-Neural. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but again, it literally turns your cell phone into an SRT streaming device. So I mean, let's be honest, the cell phones have a great camera, and if that's all you got, it becomes a camera, encoder, streaming device all in one. So I think that, we saw lots of our broadcast partners leverage Degeros, sending Degeros into people's homes with either small, handy cams, mirrorless DSLRs, whatever, sort of again as a camera solution. But again, whatever we could get our hands on. We sent with our partners at NBA 2K, we were sending Heyvision encoders into some of their facilities. Again, a little higher bandwidth, a little better quality, but again, they could afford to do that as opposed to other customers that weren't willing to spend the money, but maybe others had some other, I'm sure, creative ways. There was lots of creative ways out there.
Exactly. We used everything that was available out there. On the first day of the pandemic, went to Apple and I got like 40 iPhones and downloaded the Barracks software app. So the SRT, set up the Heyvision gateway, used the decoders at the plant to bring things back and forth. Used a lot of the Panasonic 120 camera, I think it was, for the main host place. We got those in as soon as we could. But yeah, and a lot of them, I'll say, looked better in the end once we got there. It took us about 2.5 weeks to ramp up, but I'll tell you, 3 days everybody was back on the air. And there's tons of tools out there, and we started cheaply with just like set iPhones, and then eventually got up to the higher res cameras. We did never get into huge cameras in people's houses; just wasn't any space for them. But like the Panasonics and the Sony 120s were probably the most we used. Everybody, because you give you high quality, very simple. And yeah, SRT is our transport between buildings, and NDI was within the building, and vMix. We still got 40 vMixes running today. Just roll them out one at a time, bang, 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 go. You can link vMix together if you need like 6, 8 cameras. Just keep linking them together, and you can put controls on them to pull video files down. So we tied them to our Avids, pull the final audio back to them, so they could do everything they wanted to do. It was, it was kind of like the Wild West, but it was really amazing what we could pull off of. And I think our saving grace was Apple's iPods, or the earpods, whatever they call them, for Mike and I. It took like 8 seconds to set up, so we had intercom on one side, program on the other side, and we used the microphone on them on the day of launch. So it was like, it was great. And then we went back to the broadcast mics, and it never quite sounded the same.
We have a question about that.
Okay, question from home.
Any missing products or solutions you were expecting to see from Mark?
Any missing products or solutions you were expecting to see? It has been a 3-year window, so that's a lifetime in a lot of technological cycles. So it may be things that were just kind of under glass in 2019 that you thought might be there, or other things that you hoped would be there that weren't there.
Well, the one thing that I was looking for and didn't find is, when the pandemic started, we used the Heyvision gateway in AWS, and it works, but it's a little clunky. But somebody mentioned about multi-viewers, and we had to go through externals to make multi-viewers on them. And with all the people running on this thing with vMixes and that, I was kind of hoping that somebody would have taken all the glue and brought it together. That is a huge open spot for a future party for somebody, because we are still ramping up remote productions. The idea of going back to studio is probably not ever going to happen, because our talent decided they're moving away. So if they're in Kelowna, I'm going to get them in Kelowna. They're not coming back to Toronto. Anybody else?
I still think I hope we're getting there. I still think we have some work on 2110. I think there's still a lot to be desired there. Interop, standards. Again, there's not that vendors were talking a lot about it, which was surprising. But I mean, again, everyone talks about it, but actually seeing a, you know, fully end-to-end implemented solution and really having lots of case studies, I think is still a growing opportunity for the industry.
I think maybe there's been a movement around 2110. It's just taken so long for all the pieces to come together that people have been finding other ways, you know, other, either that be a proprietary system, you know, through a manufacturer or whatever. But yeah, 21, not meaning that 2110 is dead, but it's just, it hasn't evolved and become de facto as quickly as everybody, I think, thought would have wanted or thought would happen. And of course, the pandemic didn't help in between either. But
Paul, you really kind of bridged that world for a lot of your clients and kind of aggregating everything you see at the show. Were the things that clients that perhaps weren't going that asked you to follow up on that just weren't there, or that you were hoping would be done, or wow, look at that, it's done, it's working. It's a fully baked product.
I think one thing that, and I touched on it, one thing that we have a group of clients interested in using NDI as a format, and you know, pleasantly surprised just how much of it there was. I wouldn't call it pervasive, but you know, there's quite a bit of adoption now of NDI, especially with NDI 5 being, you know, the freshest new kid on the block now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was curious when Viz purchased, you know, the NDI or you know, New Tech really, and I mean, they sort of haven't really advanced the product much. I mean, obviously the standard is you know, expanding, and obviously third-party integrations. Obviously, Bird Dog was there, you know, demonstrating today, and they sort of, I think, were a product that just sort of grew out of this whole NDI, you know, area. But Viz really didn't show much advancement in that, and sort of, you know, and even I'll be quite honest, we asked a little bit of the question, like, so what's your plan? You bought this, now what are you going to do with it? Because I always sort of looked at, while I liked NDI, I didn't see it as being adopted as much by some of the big players, which meant if you wanted to use it as a standard, you were limited on what, you know, software or hardware platforms you could integrate on it, and thinking that Viz would help elevate that into sort of the mainstream. So again, Viz, Grass, you know, Evertz, whatever, EBS, and yet silence right now. So maybe a little bit to the previous question about what was missing, like what's going on there? There was a lot of adoption, but you know, but forced by maybe a little bit by third-party vendors and not necessarily the owner of the technology, which was maybe a bit of a head scratcher for me, but maybe others.
I think that was partly their plan all along, was that it would be something that other manufacturers would embrace.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess it's happening.
So Anthony asks, what are the specific issues with ST2110?
Specific issues with 2110. Graham, what do you think? Just kidding. We'll get to you in a minute. Yeah. Specific issues with 2110. I think that's a Lane and David thing.
I'll say I'm not really sure of any specific issues with 2110. It's basically just not complete. And I think the dream is, you know, when we get to IP connectivity, is we have the video, the audio, and all the control. And it's just such a complex world to go on that we spend so much time just trying to get this manufacturer, this control, and that control to work, that it becomes just exhausting. And I think people are just kind of waiting. I mean, everybody's got to either pick a vendor and live in a tiny microcosm. That's just from my point. We've done some bubbles in them, but they're hard to expand. And then the next product comes out and it's not exactly compatible.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that I would say that I felt I was being sold when, you know, the first discussions came out around the 2110 standard was, you know, flexibility, interoperability. You can quickly, dynamically change 720, 1080, 4K, you know, everything is just sort of there and you just, you know, go. And well, the reality is in deployment, that's not entirely true. And it can be very complicated to switch back and forth and changing flows and managing, the different interops between, vendors. I mean, I'm not an expert on this one, but I would say that there's still some, standards that need to be solidified and, across the different manufacturers. And so it's, the dream of it being as dependable as we all came to know SDI as has just not been realized, or as simple, right? I think that's one thing for me. It's just not. We haven't built the trust or the simplicity with it for everyday use.
I think we take it one step farther, just the networks you have to build and the switch configurations. It's not like you have to have one skill set. You now need 4 skill sets to keep it working.
Okay, Ryan asks, what technology would you watch for at 2023 NAB?
What would you watch for at 2023? Your second NAB, Graham. What are you gonna go and look to see when you get there?
Yeah, I know they keep adding the numbers to the, for the resolution and all that. I think when we look at here at RTA and at Toronto Metropolitan University, we're always looking at ways, and I followed around Rick, Brian, and the team at RTA, and we're thinking about how can we do things very efficiently and at a price point that we can afford. And I think you see Blackmagic and you see other products really giving students the opportunity to be alongside some of the players, such as Dome Productions and Bell, and some of the other bigger producers. So that was kind of neat to see different companies that I've seen before, and then products that we've used here in RTA. But it was really interesting to hear from some of the smaller companies and from technology such as teleprompters and some of the smaller gadgets that we've never heard of, but could really play a big role into the education and to the learning here in RTA. And so I think it's not just about big switchers, but it's about these smaller tools that can really add up. I mean, a big example here to celebrate at RTA is we have the Terra Awards every year. It's our award show, and I was the associate producer for it when we were all remote, and Brian as at the Anatomy running everything, but we were all at home. And so we talk about remote production, right, as it's continuing, but how can that be a workflow that continues for us students who don't have the fancy computers and the fancy softwares? How can we make that accessible for others? So I think that's really neat to see some of the smaller products come out, and some of the companies that we wouldn't necessarily recognize. But I will say I was totally overwhelmed with all the amount of, I think as a student, that in the United States, the industry is a lot different. It's massive, right? To see the scale of it, and to see companies that we're never familiar with, and that maybe we can, maybe Rick can fund us some more to get some of those gadgets. So, but yeah, no, I think that would be my comment on that.
You got a shopping list for Rick? Is that what you're saying? The students came back with a shopping list. Wayne?
I'm also going to add that I think a big change for next year is going to be, I think the world's changing and productions are changing. I think the esports and the entertainment world and the gaming world are going to lead broadcasting. They're already much higher res. They already have much more there. I think the days of having your giant video switchers, your giant video servers playing them, I don't see a next generation coming unless there are IP in virtual and shared. I think it's the gaming people that are going to push us to change, because we're no longer making a flat product. The new product has to be three-dimensional and interactive, and I think that's going to change. And it isn't there yet, but that's what I'm going to watch out for.
For me, and again, we're a supplier to the industry. I don't have a direct corner of broadcasting. So for me, it's more, I guess, just a personal interest, you know, a little niche that I sort of touched on, and that's seeing how things evolve with LED walls and part of production and moving away from green screen. You know, Planer were the only ones. No, I think there might have been one other, but there wasn't a big presence there of displays like that. Maybe partly because this was sort of NAB light, but I would assume we'll be seeing more and more of that at NAB and certainly in studios. So,
so a couple of things I would say. So one, as we move towards more IP-based communications or transport, I'm concerned around security and interconnect with the plant. So as a third-party OB provider, and I need to connect with multiple plants, how do I address security, firewalls, NAT translations, and what are my vendors and suppliers doing to help that facilitate that? Two, I think to build on sort of that is all the different vendors. How do I, again, as a speaking very personally, how do I support all my different customers who have different choices in manufacturers? The great thing with SDI was, well, it didn't matter as long as you could accept this cable. You could pretty good, like we could connect, or if you could decode my ASI stream or whatever, you were great. But now we're are we still talking about that? Are we starting to talk about even remote production? We're now sending multiple streams. How do we handle host broadcast services? Does the solution evolve, or does the industry evolve where for live production, which is where we focus, one broadcaster distributing signals to many different, or maybe one production company, I should say, distributing multi-signals to each broadcaster to create their own at-home production for distribution in their geographical region? So, and can we get to a standard, across that? Like, I mean, there's lots of competing technologies right now. So who will win the war? Or will we find manufacturers start to embrace, multiple standards or multiple formats, and allow us to, as a customer or customers, freely pick and choose. I want to use this for this application, that for that application. Because right now, it's, if you sort of pick a flavor, you're sort of married to it.
Totally agree. And I think we're stuck with a little bit of the wild, wild west. I think the answer to all those is yes. I think we're gonna retool our staffs. They all have to know. You mentioned security. It's something I didn't bring up because it's a day-long topic. Security is going to be the first question every time you do something, then followed by your networking, and again, everything else is going to fall into place. It's just going to get a little bit more complicated, but 10 times more powerful.
I think we saw, and you guys all touched on it, that, augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality. I'm just wondering if you guys see significant deployment uses in your day-to-day space, whether it's systemizing things from Paul's side, Bell and Dome, are your customers, internal customers, or your external customers asking for it? Graham, do you see that you're using it now here at the school? So do you see that being furthered and maturing over the next little while?
Sounds good. I think we, as RTA students, we learn the foundations of broadcast. I think that's what we really are known for at RTA. But I do see that we are growing in that we are learning the new Unreal Engine softwares, and we're seeing the demand, and we're seeing the jobs. And I think you can probably touch on this as industry leaders, but there are big needs for jobs in these industries. And so it takes a long time in curriculum to add courses like this, as Rick knows and as Jacob understands. And so I think as a student, I think we all need to kind of sit in a lecture hall like this and say, okay, well, now what are the needs, such as the different technologies that you're talking about. And we have a blank canvas Studio B just here on the first floor. It's a multi-purpose studio, but I do think as we want to bring in virtual production and LED walls and stuff like that, it opens up the possibilities.
to still establish our foundational broadcast skills, but really branch on the technology. And of course, as we all know it, it comes down to storytelling and how can we use the tools to best serve our story.
Exactly. I'll bring back to the point of the motion tracking has got so cost effective now, and even in cameras. Like I can get a $2,000 camera that gives me extremely high motion tracking with Unreal engines on it. That is get back to the big point of us telling stories. And we're not going to be building a 300-foot studio and build a giant set and have it fixed. It's going to be a graphic artist making it. We still will have maybe sets for your multiple levels in it, but it's going to be very portable. And I think most of the studios going forward are going to be much smaller. And this is not being driven by the broadcast industry. This is being driven by the gaming industry. And it's just become so much cost effective and so much more flexible. You know, again, we currently have huge studios that are used for 1.5 hours a day for one thing only. That's it. Downtown Toronto, you know, that studio is going to be a combination of green screen and LED walls. I mean, LED walls made a giant change in the last 3 years. There's a company in the States called VU. I don't know if anybody saw it down in Vegas. Because of the pandemic, they opened up like 5 or 10 studios across the US, and people would go to the closest 180 green screen and the LED wall, interconnect and do their shots. That's just really cost effective, and they can move. And I think that just is going to explode. And I think it's going to explode because again, the gaming people are pushing it. The broadcast is going to ride on the tails because it gives us so much more power.
I was going to say, so one thing I'll throw another term into the mix, which is volumetric studio, which again, I'm sure many of us have seen some of the behind the scenes look on Mandalorian and some of the wonderful things they're doing now with, you know, again, that Unreal Engine and you know, LED, you know, sets. For me, one of the practical challenges I think there is one, the technology's there, but the creative solution behind designing those looks is still costly and time consuming. And it's a skill set that I'm not sure if it's widely available right now. So where are all these graphic artists and designers coming from?
Where's the
You're moving them forward, right? You're
Yeah.
taking them from after and bringing them forward in your production cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that there's.
That's why we started this year.
I think also, you know what, there is a challenge that when we talk to production, you know, there was an idea of a capital investment in building a studio, building a look. You know, we put LED walls, we put in LED lights, we put in furniture, we put in flooring. And so now we're going to say, hey, take all of that money. We're not going to do any of that. And we're going to invest in graphic designers that are going to have to build those looks. And then once you've built one look, you now need to evolve it. And then you need people to program it. And then you need people to operate it. So I think, well, you know, it sounds great. And I think it is. And I think it opens up a wonderful opportunity for creative storytelling and efficiency long term. I think there's a retooling that the industry has to go through that's going to take some time. And right now, I think, you know, where we're seeing it is the big guys that can afford to do it. So the Disneys of the world. But, you know, how do we get it so that, you know, local news stations can do it? There's some time there between. Right now, that's still pretty bleeding edge. And I think we need to figure out a way to make that more affordable and accommodating to smaller players.
I think right now, a lot of that sort of, well, mentioning projects like The Mandalorian, that's a segment that I guess really isn't represented necessarily in our group attending, but that's the whole cinema side. You know, that piece of SMPTE, and also, you know, higher end production as well, you know, the Netflixes of the world and the Amazons. I think that's where a lot of this higher end LED wall and virtual and augmented reality technology is happening. And of course, you know, as everything trickles and filters as it always does, that will move its way into actual broadcast as well at some point. But I think right now it's actually the series and film production that's making use of this.
Certainly in those bigger volumes. I think we're starting to see those elements being brought into smaller spaces. You know, if you think of the Super Bowl halftime show, there was a lot of LED within each of those little pods being used. So it wasn't a big masterful volume like a Mandalorian, but being able to bring these smaller volumes, You know, you don't necessarily need the big wraparound. You can have a nice flat wall and have some practical elements in front and take advantage of that. But certainly that VisFX thing needs to move to the front end so that you have content to display on that. I wanted to maybe roll this right into the people. You know, over the last 24 months, a lot of people have retooled, have moved on, have moved away. You know, are there some big holes in the organizations today that need to be filled? You know, are you lacking specific skill sets, not only in these new technologies, but maybe in traditional roles that may have left, for lack of a better word. So are there some people spaces that students might be looking to fill, right? Are there opportunities for them in each of your organizations?
We are hiring.
We are hiring. Everybody's hiring technical and production. It's growing fast. A lot of people checked out and went away, and plus the demand is back twice as big. There's lots of productions going on in the TV industry. I know I was talking to Gleb earlier. He's hiring. You know, everybody's looking for people.
I think so yes, I think there's, you know, there are holes and gaps, because again, I think you know, we've had, you know, many individuals that I've worked with and had the pleasure of working with, you know, wonderful, talented individuals. But, you know, the technology in the last few years has been evolving very quickly. And it's evolving and expanding, or there's an assimilation. So again, we've seen IT, AV, broadcast all collide. And so where if you were an expert in one discipline now, or sorry, previously you were an expert in one discipline, you now need to be multidisciplinary. Again, I think that as we look at, you know, more, you know, software-defined solutions, the ability to troubleshoot and understand, you know, signal path is not as clear because it's not as linear anymore. Signals go into this ominous either cloud, box, whatever, bunch of stuff happens, and then something magically kicks out where, you know, traditionally, you know, we would patch from, you know, processor to appliance to processor to, you know, monitor. And you could stop, you could break the chain anywhere along the line and say, oh, this must be what was causing the issue, the last piece in the chain, where now microservices, you know, that are happening on flows, a lot harder to diagnose, a lot harder to troubleshoot, you know. So I think that's a challenge. And again, even, you know, just, I'm sure, you know, we had, when we talked about the pandemic and shifting that, like, again, like, you know, some people might, you know, again, I'll joke, not that this happened, but it's like, well, how am I going to get a broadcast camera in the living room? Well, why is that the solution? Do you know what I mean? The solution isn't to get a broadcast camera in the living room of someone's home, but that was some people's mindsets, right? Like, here's the problem, here's the solution. And we said, no, we have to change the thinking. We have to change the thinking and say, you know what? And really, whether we were forced there or just people were willing to accept it, we said, you know what? This is now your camera. And I mean, I'm sure if I told you a few years ago, I'm going to go film a segment on my iPhone, people would be like, you're not a real broadcaster. No real broadcaster shoots on an iPhone.
And we ended up shooting like 4 series on iPhones. And you know what? Nobody can tell the difference. But you're right about the skills. I mean, everybody has to be able to do software. I mean, we had our camera guy is now tweaking the software code so the motion control is now tracking properly, because this camera has a different lens on it. So he has to go tweak it. That's going on. Securities, network switching, IP. Everybody has to know that to at least this level, right? Even if you're making a film, you have to know these are now your toolkits. We used to have screwdrivers and BNCs and black tape. Now it's all these new tools. It's all soft, because many times the cameras are Wi-Fi now, and you put them on, you don't have a cable on them anymore.
Question from outside. In regards to AI, what was your impression of what you saw at NAB? Where do you see it improving the production workflow?
So with regards to AI, what did you see at NAB, and how do you see it improving the production workflows?
I guess I can start. I think I saw it everywhere, going between the different halls. You know, we talked about capitalize, we talked about create, and I think the conversation is how do we personalize experiences. And actually, you brought up the NFL draft, and I thought that actually was really interesting. I was at the Bellagio fountains and then, saw the stage in the middle of the pond, and I was like, okay, now that is cool. So I think it kind of was interesting to see some of the new ideas to really bring back the in-person experiences. But then if you aren't able to be there in person, how can we make this a little bit more exciting for those at home and around the world? So I think it was talked about everywhere. Yes, there was the hall where they're talking about how to make money and how to make the experiences better. But I do think it was talked about in all the conversations. I remember at the Ross dinner, we had a good conversation about, how are these traditional broadcast setups, able to expand to our metaverse and online worlds that we're seeing.
I'd say AI is used in every single part. From the beginning, when you say, I want to shoot somewhere, you're going to go into your system and AI is going to give you 10 options for the city, what's available, where it's not, and give you options that you wouldn't otherwise know. When you go out, oh, I know the church. Well, now you're going to be able to go into the system and it'll give you 10 more options and even tell you the booking. All the way through the process. And then the metadata just keeps building. We use AI now to, every time we shoot on the camera, it gives us scene detection, voice recognition, gives us a script automatically published so somebody can search on it. Did somebody say this? Did we go there? Where are we? So that wasn't available 2 years ago. Now we're doing it every day. We use AI for closed captioning, live closed captioning goes on, because it just can be done. And then as we get into the metaverse, AI is going to give us more and more in every step of the way. So the more information put from the beginning and bring it, it allows more personalization and allows you to expand your experience. It's just everywhere, and I can't even pinpoint where it isn't.
So I will say I think AI for me, has two important roles in the future of our business. So one, we always talk about content is king. I will say we have so much content we don't know what is king anymore, and I think that's where AI will become important to our storytellers, which is how do I quickly filter through content to find the true story, because we can see, as Lane mentioned, speech to text, so I can start searching quickly for keywords, facial recognition, object recognition. So again, I can quickly now go through all of this content that I have that I've said is so valuable, but up until now we've had a hard time understanding what we actually owned when it came to content. So I think that's important. I also look at it as very much as a utilitarian tool. When we can start to say, well, what, do I need to have all these cameras following, certain activities, or can I shoot with a high res large canvas and then have certain cutouts come out of that? Could I have, PTZ cameras auto tracking? So do I need to, can I just use it as a utilitarian product to say, hey, how do I focus all my, creativity? How do I take all of that talent that I have in people and put it towards really being creative and not just doing utilitarian functions of just pan tilt, right? How do I leverage that, robotics or, AI to facilitate that so I can, use my money and my talent to really drive value?
So again, we're not a broadcaster, so more as an observer, I think, and touching on what David said, I think the sort of the holy grail of what AI can be is what he was talking about, that we've talked for years about the metadata and garbage in, garbage out, and who's going to collect it and all of that. It's exactly the the goal of AI is automating the identifying what you have and who's in it and what they've said, and just even for in a news operation, doing a story on X, well, through AI, you can be going through your entire archive and easily figuring out what's there that fits into the story you're doing. And to me, that's sort of the goal of what AI will be as it evolves.
I want to just quickly add, as we were talking, companies like Panasonic or PTZ Optics, when we were talking about tracking, they were actually there to sell to customers like schools or churches. And so I think the technology like AI has really emphasized those smaller pockets of industry where we wouldn't see that 10 years ago, but they were really talking to education leaders and places of worship as well.
You touched on it, Paul. You just mentioned kind of metadata and garbage in, garbage out. Certainly metadata seems to be creeping up more and more across all kinds of different platforms. Are you seeing it being much more useful now? Are you guys seeing metadata across places where you didn't think you'd see it previously?
It's certainly, I think, and broadcasters would have a better sense if I'm just blowing smoke here, but I think my perception is that yes, the metadata is getting better, the tools are getting better. I mean, it was originally metadata was the real number off of a tape, and the date it was shot. The tools are getting better. The people factor is still, people are getting more efficient at identifying what's relevant and what people will want to know later. And so, yeah, it's we're getting better at it.
Right. And certainly on the cinema side, there's that kind of the rapid group within SMPTE that's developing a lot of this metadata stuff. So I think had that cinema person been able to attend today, they would have a lot to say about that. But I'm curious to see if it's crossing over.
I think also, especially for this group, which when we talk about metadata, is really even just about from an engineering and quality control perspective. And we can look at things like data sets for transport streams. And then we can talk about how we leverage AI to identify why there's an error or an issue or challenging, or even if we just, from a master control perspective or play out, there was a glitch last night at 7 o'clock. Right now, what's our troubleshooting? I don't know. Did anyone see it? But now we can go back through a very comprehensive data log and be able to see, okay, there's the audio stream, there's there's all the data, there's the video streams, what was going on, what was the compression ratio, what was the decoding, what was the CPU utilization, so again, I think even when we look at from an engineering standpoint, well, yes, we typically use metadata to describe content. We're also now just talking about metadata to just describe engineering quality control. And really that will provide all of us the tools to ensure that we can deliver quality product, because we will have that intelligence to really understand what happened, especially as we talk about how complicated the world is becoming with, sort of the adoption of the new standards. This is the data. These will be key tools for us to be successful.
You can push it to the next step farther is with the metadata, like for example, talk about master control. We track master control, the user experience, right to the device that you are viewing it on. And what the AI will come back to us and said, oh, this Xbox, I won't say Android, but maybe this Xbox, everybody started glitching or having sync issues at 3 o'clock. So we wanted to go back, find out why. Was it a network issue? Is it a design flaw with the box? Many times we go back to manufacturers, find out we have a flaw in the system. So, the metadata isn't only for content, it's all the way through for user experience. And it just keeps growing, and it's everywhere now. The other fact we do is for the news department, there's an AI engine that records all the news feeds coming in. In the morning, there's this bubble monitor. It comes up with what's the highlights and how big is it? If it's a big thing, it comes a big circle, a big color red, and tells you what it is. You click a button, it gives you all the video clips to it. It's that's off the shelf from half the companies nowadays. It just really helps tell the story, and it just fills everything in. And it's just going to keep going as we figure out how to handle it better.
Any more from back there?
Brad says, how can the virtual studio sustain when the technology and video walls advances quickly, thus having the potential of a virtual studio having outdated video walls?
So the sustainability of these big LED virtual volumes, given the rapid change in technology in these LED panels, is it sustainable to invest in one today?
That's always the best question for it. When you're small, it's a lot bigger, a lot harder of a question. When you're big, those monitor walls just go down from, like, say, the newsroom to sports to production to wherever else. You just start to leverage your walls. But the walls are expensive. But today, everybody using giant walls anyway, and they are fairly expensive. So if we can just use them better, it's a better return for the investment.
I would say, I think that, listen, if you're making any technology investment, you want to make sure you're getting that return on investment before the life of the product. So I think that's just good business decisions, regardless of technology. But there is something else to be said. I mean, again, while LED walls have been getting, a finer pitch, tighter pitch, at some point we do that. There is a physical limitation. I mean, you can only put the LED so close to one another. I mean, even if they're adjacent, perfectly adjacent, like there is a zero sum there. So they can only get so good. And then the other thing is, I think that, that's very perceivable to the human eye, and especially only at proximity. So again, you can have a very outdated LED wall. As long as you move your subject matter far enough away from the LED wall and your camera further away from that, it doesn't look any different than when you have a high grade LED wall and you're standing, 6 inches. So I think that there's the tools don't die as quickly, but you have to understand the limitations of them as they age, but they're still manageable. I think they're still very manageable. It's just.
And I think you get the key point. They're just tools, right? And when they were tools, you know how to use them.
We had a fun story having the LED wall in our booth. We had somebody was zoomed in a little tighter, and the wall was out of focus, but they couldn't. There was something wrong with the lens. They thought we can't get this thing in focus, but it was right. It's on the LED wall. We're not focused on something real. We're focused on something out of focus. Anyway, sorry, Rick from the audience.
Since we went back to talking to virtual and volumetric, is green screen like really dead? Is it dead? That's what I was going to say. In building a lot of spaces, especially for the broadcast industry, volumetric can still apply to green screen. And having worked and designed the TFO one, it's still a very valid space. And frankly, I could even turn the lights off on the green screen because it works volumetrically. It knows where the sort of performance area is. We can do character lighting and all these things that cinematic people sort of do. But when you're talking sort of the volumetric LED wall space, it doesn't really apply as much, does it, to the broadcast industry because of film? Because when you're cross shooting with 3-4 cameras, you're not sort of changing the dynamics of the image in the back. There's just one display system, and if those images cross over, like how does it apply? Like how do you see it applying to the broadcast industry more so than just a rear screen display? If you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll just go this way. Everything is just a tool in the toolkit. Green screens will be around forever. They have a purpose. You're never going to get an LED wall to do a stadium, right? So you'll need a green screen for those abilities. An angle, so it's there. So LED walls are good for something. And again, it's just tools. So in broadcasting, we'll use the LED walls where it's important, where we need connection between the talent and a person. But it's not for everything. There's not one tool for everything, but we can do sets so much better. But a set might be a green screen and an LED wall. Depends which way we are going. Again, they're just tools we're going to have in our toolkit to tell our story.
Yeah, I see that, even again, when we're talking about broadcaster, where we're talking about more of a, value prop, the green screen even allows for volumetric extension. So you could have a very small concentrated LED area, and then just by bordering that with, an element of green screen, that allows the computer to delineate where to start to virtualize, the graphic even beyond. I think that, again, there's some, there's pros and cons to both green screen and LED. And I think, based on your application, you have to choose the right tool. I personally like LED because it does offer, backlighting. It offers, more of a natural lighting effect, reflections off of other hard surfaces, where green screen, obviously, that's a little more challenging, right? If you have a chrome desk in a green screen, you're not going to get that, nice lighting effect if you're supposed to be in a desert landscape in the background. But with an LED screen, you can, it creates a little more natural element. But again, I think that, like that was said, right tool for the right job. I don't think it's a case is one infinitely better than the other. No, I think it's choosing the right application, the right product.
I would imagine a lot of talent probably would be happier with LED as well, because they have the they're not waiting for something to be rendered. They're having the immediate vision of what's there on the
A
screen.
little more interactive that way relative to what they're seeing.
I would say when we stopped at the zero density booth, I mean, when we study chroma key and green screen, we have it set up here. Obviously, we know we're using chroma key, but I think the technology has advanced so far. Just it really gave me a perspective to go between the booths and see the LED walls and then see the chroma key and how advanced that is. You hold up the water bottle and you can see right through it, like that really is in chroma key. So yeah, I do think with the Unreal Engine and the technology there, I maybe a couple years ago would say, oh yeah, we're getting rid of green screens and we're just using monitor walls now. But now my opinion has changed because I see this perspective now in this technology with virtual production, that there is still a space for it in broadcast, and we see it in some broadcasters, but not all. But I think with the advancement of the Unreal Engine and technology, I do think we'll be able to do it here, even in a learning environment, and the production value will increase as well.
Just to add to that, I think we can look at there are lots of LCD manufacturers out there. You can now purchase quite comfortably a 96-inch display. And I think of one of our applications where we used to just do remote contribution. We're going to interview the prime minister, or we're interviewing a politician, and we would set them up in a small studio, and we would have to green screen, and then we have to cut in that image. Well, now with a 96-inch display, I pop in a PowerPoint slide, frame the camera, and boom, New York City skyline, Toronto skyline, and it's quite easy. And I mean, it's just old movie TV magic, right? We haven't invented anything new there. But again, the reality is a number of years ago, you couldn't get a 96-inch TV, so you couldn't probably get the framing right. But now for, I don't know, $6,000 or whatever it is, boom, that's a much quicker and faster and easier way of doing green screen. You could still do it with green screen, still very effective, but required a little more complexity in lighting and positioning, and then who's doing the composition, or is it doing it in post? And now, real time. So again, more of that real time, I don't know, realization, real time realization.
The more you move up front, the better the storytelling gets.
Yeah.
So maybe before we get to some final thoughts from each of you, maybe just one quick comment around ATSC3 or HD radio. I think, Lane, you mentioned that, versus some of the new ways of distributing the content from the broadcast side. How do you see that playing out? Is there, certainly here in Canada specifically?
Well, here in Canada, I'm very torn because I'm
Right.
traditionally a broadcaster, and we're looking at doing ATSC and HD radio. We've rolled them out, but I'll be very honest. I don't see going any more money into it. With digital and direct to the personalization, I can feed you the same quality. I can feed you better quality to your car and to your home and to your smart speaker than I can with an over-the-air transmitter. It's, again, over-the-air transmitter. Face it, it's a single point stick. It's never going to be perfect everywhere. When I go to an IP, I have thousands of transmitters around that I'm going to go on, and I have thousands of devices. So I personally think it's done. I think broadcasting, we create, we do content, and we distribute to you. How we distribute is going to change. It's not going to be over the air. I think whatever flavor we want, we got to feed it to you. But I think streaming and over the top and interactive is coming. Anybody else?
I'm, again, not a broadcaster, but I'm really not seeing a big road for ATSC3 in Canada. We were already, before cord cutting, one of the most cabled, like cable TV countries around, which would negate the need for over the air. But yeah, just as everybody moves to more and more content that they're receiving over an internet stream, it kind of cuts ATSC and ATSC3 out of the picture.
There's still a pipe to your display. It's just your display and that pipe has changed, whether it's over the air or whether it's through.
I haven't figured out how to get my cell phone to tune into it, so
We'll talk.
But yeah, I just look at it and say, you know, again, my personal opinion is there's probably more of these in homes than there are televisions. Even in my own home, you know, I have one, my wife has one, my kids have one, and we only have one family television. So, you know, I think that the idea of, you know, content consumption is really moving to that personalized, you know, format. And whether we like it or not, the consumer has said, you know, these things are how I want to consume my content going forwards. So I think we have to follow the consumers.
We still need to
I don't
produce
think we
that
have any
content.
choice but to follow what the
Right.
consumer wants.
Can I ask a question? Who here has a home stereo working? Wow, I'm impressed. Who here has a smart speaker? This is the most loudest crowd I've ever seen. Thank you.
Did you have a-
Well, I was just gonna say, as you know, we see this, you know, through our peers and you know, through the social media platforms that I'm on, you know, I think of TikTok often and some of the technology there, right? And a lot of us in our TA throughout the pandemic, we had to turn to platforms like TikTok and YouTube, and I think that is where we can do really cool things with broadcasts, such as multi-camera. Like I saw a live multi-camera concert on TikTok once, and it being live streamed. So, you know, yes, as you say, the pipe is changing, but I do think there are ways through social media and new over-the-top platforms that we can be creative to capture those new angles and those new experiences. And yes, you can watch it on your iPad, but then maybe interact with, you know, the event on your smartphone. So lots of cool ways that we'll, I'm sure, find out in the near future.
Maybe with that, some final thoughts. Your experience at NAB 2022. You plan to go back for 2023. Were you left feeling excited for the future, or kind of longing for more?
I'll start. I think next year is going to be great. I think looking forward, the world is changing. I think it's important that we understand it's changing and we follow it. And there's so many more options. We can help deliver what the next generation is going to be. But the two things we know is people want experience and they want personalization. So we have to start to address that. No longer are we just pushing content out. It's got to be more interactive.
I've said before, I think this was NAB Light this year. I think we'll get back to normal next year. And it was partly NAB Light this year because of all the fallout. Well, of course it was because of the fallout of the pandemic, but I think that was also a part of the reason there wasn't as much wowza stuff happening there. As we settle back more into normal things and, you know, supply chain issues and all of that gets sorted out, I think there probably will be a lot more to see next year, and looking forward to it.
I might have a slightly more pessimistic view. Well, I look forward to next year, and I certainly will be attending. You know, I look at the evolution of the trade show, which NAB was, or really has been, and you know, and once upon a time, you know, there was trade show floor deals, like, you know, like it was like, you know, that was an actual place where you were going to have transactions. Like, if you buy today, we'll give you a discount. Well, not only are we not doing that anymore, we're not even talking about sales anymore. We're really, again, I found that more of my conversations were about, how do I help you? What are your problems? What are your sticking points? What are you trying to achieve? How do I become a value add partner, right? How do I become a value add partner with the technology that I have or the people that I have to you know, grow your business? So I guess that, you know, I'm curious to see, because again, there are lots of the small vendors that, you know, I've always appreciated going and looking at all the wonderful gadgets and gimbals and you know, cranes and all those things. I mean, again, I'm a big kid when it comes to that stuff. I love seeing all the toys, but I wonder whether or not is NAB going to continue to be that, because the big players, I don't know if they're going to continue down that, you know, that sort of line of thinking, and they're not going to be there to show off their toys anymore, because they don't really have those kinds of toys to show anymore. And so now, you know, again, if they're moving more towards software solution providers, what do I need a giant booth for? You know, to talk to you, to, you know, innovate with you? Like, what am I showcasing? So I don't, I have a little more, I guess maybe, you know, a little more skepticism. Again, I think the show will be successful. I think it will continue to be. I wonder how it's going to evolve. I think it might have, this might be the first year of transition.
I think that's true. I don't think we're going to go back, much as I expect next year probably to be bigger than it was this year. I don't think we're probably going to go back to the NABs we're used to. I don't think they'll physically be the size they were, and probably won't have the, you know, the 100-ish thousand attendance anymore either. But I think it'll still, and also manufacturers have seen, you know, that they can get by missing it for a couple of years. But I think it'll still be around. I think it'll probably still be one of the premier opportunities for people to see what's new. And it'll probably reinvent itself. This was sort of the transition year, and we'll see next year, hopefully being a normal-ish year, we'll see what NAB evolves into.
Well, I've never been there before, so obviously I came in really excited to see all the gadgets. And I mean, we haven't had an opportunity to use a lot of the gear in the last couple of years, so that was kind of neat to see, you know, having the opportunity to try out some of the technology and that we haven't seen. But I think, you know, I understand the world that we're changing into, and I see how you're talking about the evolution of NAB. I think it'd be really great. I went on that tour and workshop. I think, you know, hopefully next year I can maybe do another workshop. And what I really was excited about when I went on that tour was I was in the room with people who worked at NBC and who worked at Virgin. And so I think what would be a really great opportunity is if there's more of that, where we all can talk about our successes and our challenges with the technology that's in the room. So if there's more opportunity for that, I think that would be a great learning opportunity for us all.
Virtual.
Virtual tour of the show? I don't know if anybody did.
I don't know if there was anyone officially sponsored. I know there's lots of, I know there's some different web, you know, content creators that do, you know, various segments of walkthroughs and interviews with booths and booths people. I don't know if there's one official that sort of captured the whole show floor.
No,
but
I don't think so. Certainly NAB themselves didn't do anything like that. I don't
I think one of the beauties of the NAB show, though, for the vendors is the opportunity for the relationships, right?
Well,
Because what's critically important for the vendors is to know what the customers want. And a show like NAB that brings so many of those people together, you can get your product development people, your design engineers, and you can have these face-to-face conversations. What we learned over the last couple of years is although Zooms and Teams meetings are great to have that quick connection, they really are difficult to maintain and build new relationships from. And you just can't beat that face-to-face, that time together. Without that, you know, the cycles are going to start to break down because we're not going to know as vendors what you guys need specifically. And having the ability to touch that many people in 4 days, very hard to do individually.
It sounds like what you're kind of saying is perhaps NAB should be combined with an IT show and the AV show, like InfoCom, combine all those disciplines together because it seems like that's the way it's going anyway.
I think
you have Cisco and Microsoft and Juniper and
yeah,
I mean,
all those major, you know, Google and AWS is there, of course, but all of those players there, that's going to attract a lot more people and there's people at synergy too. Those industries.
I would suggest, and I'm certainly heavily involved within NAB's Cine Consortium and how they're trying to appeal to the cinematic world and bring them back into the fold. NAB is not standing still. They are definitely recognizing all these things. They are trying to find new ways to appeal to more segments and bring them all together in one location. So I think it is transition time, and I think that transition is going to continue. It's not a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan. You know, they've got 5-10-year plans in place. And I think they've certainly got the historical ability to pull off a significant show. And if they can appeal to the right people and get the right vendors there and make those connections, whether it's through tours and connections, like you were saying, Graham, you got to sit in a room with these people. You know, next year there's going to be an ASE masterclass. So you're going to have the best cinematographers in the world. They're doing a full-blown ASE masterclass. You know, those those are significant events. So to bring that kind of thing there, if they can do that for the IT world and for all these different worlds, now the relevance is there for more and more people to help training, education, and all those things, to fill some of these gaps that are out there.
Yeah, I think that, the one thing I would just like to add to this conversation is we've talked a lot about, the technology, but we just started touching on the networking that occurs. And I certainly personally, attending NAB, I come back with 1,000 ideas because of the conversations or, the little bit that I see with, one vendor, and maybe I think about that, and then I hear from another vendor that's sort of similar on the similar concept, and that starts me to, starting to think about and explore new ideas. And, and while listen, I can Google with the best of them and, look at different marketing cut sheets, but it's not the same inspiration as, speaking to vendors, having those casual conversations with both the sales folks, pre-sales engineers, solution architects. It really can be, I find, very inspiring. And so I think if nothing else, I hope that NAB never dies because of that. Even if we stop talking about product altogether, but as long as we're talking about innovation, I'm there.
Exactly, you want to come up with that. Talking to the people, going to they had far more presentations this year, both open and closed, than they've ever had in the past. And I took the opportunity to sit at a lot more of those presentations. And you're right, just the ideas from this industry is doing this, but we could leverage it for this. This is doing this, this is doing this. And you're talking to the guys who are doing it. You're not talking to, 3 or 4 levels of, these are the guys doing it, right? And they're telling you the reasons why and their pains and how they get there. And that's invaluable. And you're right, it just is inspirational and gives you 1,000 more ideas.
I think, as again, the one nice thing is, these are our colleagues, and I have to say the industry is wonderful. Most people are willing to share, right? Again, are we competing? Maybe, maybe not. But, at the end of the day, we've all been there. We've all been in the trenches. We've all, fought those, those fires. And when you're standing there talking to your colleague, they're giving you an unadulterated truth. And I think that there's so much value in hearing that.
Well, with that, I think we'll call that the final word. Special thanks to our panelists today, Graham, Lane, Paul, and David. Thank you so much for all your time and insight. Don't go just yet. The final word actually goes to Tony Miracker, who will come and take control from here. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, everybody, and Stosh, Gleb, and Jamie also, who organized this meeting, which is dynamite. Just a couple of closing comments. You can see for you guys behind you the shirts that we were talking about, and the colorful shirts. You can see them a mile away, and the sponsors were also very prominent. Oh, you got a real one? I was awarded one a couple of years ago, and I wore it cutting the grass, and the neighbors stopped. Just, what is that? So there's a couple of, a note here from Roberta Gorman. She's the membership chair at SMPTE Home Office, and she was sitting at the table with a bunch of ladies or students that were there, and she wrote back and said those students were amazing to speak with. Young women I sat with were so smart and funny. We had a great conversation about their work, what's next, shoes, and being a woman in the industry. I enjoyed it so much. One of the highlights of my trip for sure. Thanks for all that you do to make this trip possible for them, Roberta Gorman. So thank you, Rick, for putting this on and allowing the students to get to NAB. So a couple of things. One is tonight's event is been recorded. Peter will download the file and we'll clean it up a bit. Now, one thing, if I can manage this on the phone, the next meeting we're going to do is a barbecue event, as we do most Junes. Last year we didn't because of COVID, and the year before we didn't do because of COVID. This year we are going to be welcome at Zoomer Media again. And we're going to take over part of their parking lot and hopefully do that. But what I need to do is I will do it locally here as well, and I want to see if I can do this here. So I've just launched a poll on the Zoom webinar to see how many people will want to attend, because one of the things that we've noticed here tonight is we did a poll as well when you registered, how many are going to show up and how many want to do it virtually. So there's going to be a point of where it's going to make sense for us to do it, because there is a entry level to have the barbecue truck show up. So how many, if allowed, would be coming to the June meeting barbecue event? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 4 is 14. Okay. And I can't share this with you on here because, 2 out of 11 said for sure, 5 out of 11 said no, and 4 out of 11 would consider. So 12, sorry, the number's going up. So, okay, I'll leave that up for a couple of minutes, and then they can continue to poll. So location to be determined. That's news since we put this slide deck together. July and August, we have a summer break, so nothing there for, we'll be back in September. We're hoping for a great venue in September. I'm gonna end this poll here, and then people can come. How do I do that? There we go. Oh, okay, so everybody's back online again. So April's meeting, just to give you an idea, we had 78 people that registered, or registered, yes, 45 attended. This is the standards update meeting. 39 came from Canada, 1 from the US, 1 from Brazil, 1 from Hong Kong, and 1 from Mexico. So it's good to see that we are reaching out. These are the results of our election that we just had. Thanks everybody for voting. Sylvia and I are returning for our second of a 2-year term. They're 1-year term each. Jamie's returning. Randy's returning after a 10-year, something of a 10-year leave from the board duties. I think he left as a governor and now is coming back as a manager. And Jason Ross is also now a board member, and their terms start July the 1st. If anybody wants to get involved as well, elections are usually February timeframe, so just let us know. Again, there's our contact information, SMPTE.org/Toronto, or section/Toronto is our website. You can become a friend if you're not a member of SMPTE, and then you'll start getting our email blasts that we send out regularly, and then Facebook, Twitter, and our email address. And that's it for me. That's a wrap. We thank everybody. Great show. Yes, and thanks to Kevin. Kevin in the back of the room, he set up the cart for us, so we're grateful for him to be able to allow this and get it out to the virtual world. So Kevin, thank you.